For our next geometric construction, we're going to bisect an arc. So this is an arc, it's part of a circle, and I'd like to find the midpoint on that arc. Now, if you were one of the people that thought it was stupid to graphically lay this stuff out with the line because you could just simply measure the line and find the midpoint, well, I challenge you to take your scale and bend it around the arc here and to find out how long it is so you can do the math. So, I mean, obviously we can't, right? So, in this case, there is no other way to find the midpoint than the method we're going to use. And the method is practically identical. So, last time, you remember what we did? When we had our endpoint, where we had our lead, we'll stick the point of the compass at endpoint F. We're going to estimate where midway is, and then we're going to go beyond it. And then we're going to swing an arc. And then I'll go to the endpoint G on that arc. Very carefully. And I will swing another arc. Okay, so there's that football shape again, right? There's our little fish shape. And it's the same idea. The intersection of the arcs here and the intersection of the arcs here provides you with the location that you're going to use to line up your triangle with. And it's all lined up. You can go in and create that bisector. Again, is there a way to check it? How do we know it really worked? Well, with your divider, you can find the distance of the chord between F and the midpoint you just found. And then if you move it from the midpoint, it should land on G, and it does. So that was perfectly constructed. Our arc has been broken into two arcs, and this line hits that circle at the one place of perpendicularity between the line and the circle. For our next trick, I have an angle created by a line CD and DE. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to break that angle into two equal angles. Well, one of the things you'll notice looking in your toolkit is you don't have a protractor. And if that's curious, have no fear. We don't really need a protractor in this class. Most of the angles that we need to make can easily be made with the two triangles by either using them by themselves or using them in conjunction with one another. So there's no protractor included in the kit, but I would like to find halfway and break that angle into two equal parts. So like before, we're going to start off with a compass. The point of the compass is going to go to the vertex at D. Make sure you're being as accurate as you possibly can be. And then the distance we're coming out for the radius, not too important, but I wouldn't go all the way to the end of the line. I'd maybe shoot for about halfway. Okay, and you're going to make an arc from point D across the two lines. Now before, we made two arcs that look like a little football. This is going to involve an extra step. So here's our first arc. For the second arc, you're going to take the point of the compass and you're going to stick it here. You're going to stick it where the line is intersected by that arc you just made. So we'll put the point of the compass exactly perfectly right there. And then I'm going to make an arc out here. And I'll do the same thing. I'll take the point of the compass and I will put it over here where line DE is crossed by that arc. So as accurately as you can, find that point of intersection. And make yourself another small arc. So while the other bisected, while the other bisections were 2 arcs, this one requires 3. Now if you're looking at this and saying, well, how does that show you where the midpoint of this is not going to be helpful, but this is. So like we are familiar with, no doubt, with a treasure map, what are you looking for on a treasure map? Well, you're looking for the X, and there it is. So if you take your triangle and you line up vertex D with the intersection of those 2 arcs where they form that X, well, now our angle is cut into 2 equal parts. Our problem down here in the bottom right corner is dividing a line into equal segments. So I'd like to take line HJ and break it into 5 equal spaces, 5 equal lines. So again, you know, sometimes people like to fight and they want to measure it and then take that measurement and divide by 5. I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just saying this is a way easier way to do it graphically, especially when you start working with fractions of an inch, and then we have to convert them to decimal, and then we have to convert them back to fractions, and it's quite the mess. Let's lay it out using geometric construction. So now on this example, this problem, we're going to have to do something we haven't done yet. We're going to need to take our t-square and make sure the head of the t-square is sitting up against the edge of your drawing table so it slides up and down smoothly, and you always have that same exact parallel horizontal line. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our triangle on top of the blade of the t-square. And then we're going to slide them down at the same time. Maybe one hand on the triangle, one hand on the t-square. Okay. So the t-square or parallel bar is right here, and the triangle is sitting perfectly on top of it. And then maybe you can use one hand, your non-primary hand, to hold both of those so they don't move around too much. And so you can adjust the triangle. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I would like to slide the triangle over to point H. And we know if the t-square is horizontal, and this is 90 degrees to it, and we taped our paper down correctly, then the line you're about to draw is 90 degrees to line HJ. Okay, so I want to draw a line down from point H. But to do that, I've got to have my horizontal set with the t-square. I've got to have my triangle sitting on top of it. And I've got to make sure they don't move as I draw that line down, that construction line. Alright, so that's step 1. Step 1 is create a vertical line from point H that's 90 degrees to line HJ. Here's step 2. The problem is to create 5 equal spaces. So we are going to use our scale. We're just not going to use it in the way you think maybe. Okay. So we want 5 equal spaces. So find the number 5 whole inches on the regular ruler of the 16th of an inch breakdown. And I'd like you to take the number 5 and put it right at the edge, right at the end of point J. See, here's the line for 5 inches, and I put it right at the end of line HJ. And then what I want you to see is, you see where the 0 is down here? We're going to do this. We're going to twist and pivot the scale so that the 5 mark is always at the end of the line. We're going to twist and pivot until the line for the 0 touches this vertical line you made. Okay, so it's going to require a lot of little tiny adjustments and tweaks. But here's what we're looking for when we're all done. The line for the 5 is touching the end of the line HJ. The 0 is touching the vertical line that you drew. And when you've done that, put a little dot at 1, put a little dot at 2, a little dot at 3, a little dot at 4. Okay, and now we're going to take our triangle, we're going to put it back on top of the blade of the T-square. And we'll slide it down until we get to our first dot, and then lightly draw a line up. And we'll go to our second dot, and lightly draw a line up. We'll go to our third dot, and lightly draw a line up. And we'll go over to our fourth dot, and lightly draw a line up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we want to examine to make sure what we did was accurate, you can take your dividers and work your way down that line, and every one of those spaces should be exactly the same. When I was setting this up, I had the number 5 at the end of the line, and I had 0 at the end of the vertical line. Do you know why I picked the number 5? If I asked you, why did I pick the number 5 to start from, can you explain why? Well, it's because I want 5 equal parts, right? What if I wanted 6 equal parts? What would I start off with? Well, then I'd have to start off with 6, right? What if I wanted 3 equal parts? Well, then I'd need to start off with 3. Okay? And then the pivot is what's going to give us the divisions as we work our way down. What if I wanted 10? What if I wanted 10 equal spaces? Would you have to go from 0 to 10 to get that done? What do you think? Well, the answer is no. As long as the spaces are equal, you can mark as many as you want. So imagine if I wanted 10, I could put a dot every ½ inch. And when I was done, I would have 10 dots equally spaced on the diagonal, and I would have 10 divisions up on top. So the very last step, when we are all done and we're happy with our work, drawn by, well, that's you. What you want to do is you want to use one of these light pencils, either your non-photographic blue or a 4H pencil with a very sharp point, or your skinniest mechanical pencil. And we want to line up the blade of the T-square with the top of the letters drawn by. And then very lightly make a line. And then line up the edge of your T-square blade with the bottom of the word drawn by. And then make a very light line. So what I have down here are 2 very light lines. They are so light I can barely see them when I'm about 3 feet away. If your lines are darker than that, well, I'd encourage you to bust out the eraser before you start lettering your name, because even when you erase it, you'll probably still be able to see a dark line. But we want to get in the habit of making guidelines very, very lightly. Okay, and when we've got our guidelines down here, we can spend the time and letter first and last.